They sat me behind the kitchen doors. No name card, no toast, just a folding chair next to a tray of dirty dishes. I paid for the entire wedding, every flower, every fork, and my son didn't even look at me once. Hi, I'm Margaret. I raised him alone, built his life from scratch, and somehow still ended up erased from the picture. But that night, I didn't cry. I made 3 phone calls that turned the wedding upside down. What would you have done if your own child let you be humiliated like that? I'd love to hear, have you ever been made to feel invisible by the people you love most? There was no name tag, just a paper napkin tossed over a folding chair. I paused for a moment, thinking maybe there had been a mistake. Maybe the staff hadn't finished setting up. Maybe someone had forgotten to place the card with my name on it. But no one came. No one corrected the oversight. No one hurried over with an apology or led me to a proper table. Instead, a young man in a black vest who looked barely old enough to drive glanced at a clipboard and gestured toward the spot between the swinging kitchen doors and a stack of used trays. Ma'am," he mumbled, eyes darting everywhere but mine. "They said this is your seat for theme consistency, I think, for the photos and all." He smiled awkwardly, then vanished through the double doors that swung open and shut every few seconds, squeaking sharply each time like an exclamation point that no one wanted to hear. I stood there, clutching the beige leather purse Daniel had given me for Mother's Day 6 years ago. My hand trembled slightly as I traced the seam with my thumb. I'd paid for the flowers, the music, the dress, the chair rentals, the band deposit, the cake tasting, the upgraded linens. I thought that still meant something. I sat down slowly. The folding chair creaked beneath me. There was a dark stain beneath the table. Gravy, maybe. My heels stuck slightly to the tile when I shifted. Through the swinging door, I caught flashes of gold chairs, floating candles, and guests laughing over plates of filet mignon and mushroom risotto. Someone clinked a fork against a champagne glass. A cheer erupted. I heard a woman's voice, Emily's mother maybe, gushing, "To the most elegant bride our family has ever known." More cheers, more music. The band started up with a soft jazz version of At Last, fitting. I'd imagined being at the table with Daniel near the dance floor. I'd pictured giving a short toast, something simple, heartfelt, nothing flashy. Maybe a story from when he was little, the way he used to run barefoot through the backyard sprinklers screaming with laughter. Instead, I was behind a swinging door, inhaling marinara fumes, the back of my dress brushing against a cart with a broken wheel that squeaked every time someone pushed it. No one had greeted me when I arrived. No hugs, no smiles, not even Daniel. He'd been busy, adjusting his cufflinks, posing for photos with Emily's family. Her mother kissed him on the cheek like she'd raised him herself, like she was the one who stayed up when he had night terrors, like she'd saved for years just to afford braces when I couldn't pay rent and keep up with his smile at the same time. A waiter brought me a plate of cold chicken breast, steamed broccoli, and mashed potatoes with a film forming on top. No one said grace. No one noticed I hadn't eaten. I glanced down at my dress, mauve chiffon, hand-stitched. I'd spent 3 hours at the salon that morning, curling my graying hair, applying foundation to smooth the fine lines around my mouth. I'd wanted to look nice, to look like someone who belonged at her son's wedding. But now I pressed a napkin to my lips to hide the tightness, pretending to wipe a stain that wasn't there. Behind the doors, laughter swelled. Someone announced the couple's first dance. I leaned forward just enough to glimpse them twirling beneath a chandelier. Daniel's face lit up like the sun. He didn't look my way, not once. I told myself it was okay, that it was his day, that I didn't want to make a scene, but my stomach turned with a familiar ache, the kind that comes not from being forgotten, but from being deliberately edited out. My hands, folded in my lap, trembled slightly. I tightened my grip on the purse. I told myself I was overthinking, that there was a reason, that someone would come over soon and say it had all been a misunderstanding. But the minutes passed, and nothing changed. The kitchen doors opened again with a sharp bang. A gust of steam rolled in, smelling of garlic, butter, and something fried. I winced. The heat clung to my skin, mixing with the perfume I dabbed behind my ears earlier. The same scent Daniel used to say reminded him of bedtime stories and warm cocoa. I closed my eyes. Behind my eyelids, I saw a younger version of him. Daniel with skinned knees and a crooked smile, tugging on my sleeve and asking if I could stay just 5 more minutes at the park. Daniel, who once called me Mama in a voice still sticky with childhood. That boy was gone. A burst of music interrupted my thoughts. Then a voice, confident, practiced, smooth. Daniel. He stood in front of the guests, holding a microphone, thanking everyone for coming. I held my breath, waiting. He thanked Emily's parents, her siblings, her grandmother. To Emily's family, he said, for welcoming me with open arms, for making me feel like one of their own. Applause. And to my amazing bride, the love of my life, more applause. To everyone who helped make today so perfect, thank you. And that was it. No mention of me. Not a word. I stared down at my plate, the chicken now completely cold. I didn't touch it. There was a sound behind me, the scraping of another cart. A waitress passed by with a tray of crab puffs. She glanced at me, paused, then quickly looked away. I smiled, not because I was okay, but because it was all I had left. Somewhere inside, something twisted sharply. A quiet snap, not a break, not yet, but the kind of fracture that starts deep, hairline, invisible, and grows. And all I could think was I invisible to my own son? The neon sign above their heads glowed soft pink against the barnwood wall, cursive letters looping gently to form the words, "The future is forever." I watched it flicker faintly through the narrow opening in the swinging kitchen doors. Somewhere in that perfect glow under chandeliers and twinkling fairy lights was my son. But I wasn't part of it. A server passed behind me, balancing a tray of empty flutes. The clink of glass against glass followed her footsteps. Music drifted in, upbeat now, jazz giving way to something livelier. Guests laughed loudly, their voices bright and uninhibited, blending into the hum of celebration. On my side of the door, the air was heavier. Grease, sweat, and the scent of burnt garlic clung to the walls. I leaned back, just enough to see them again. Daniel, radiant in his tailored navy suit, one hand resting gently on Emily's back. She leaned into him with ease. Around them, the room shimmered with movement and color. Floating candles, floral centerpieces, pale gold runners. I recognized everything. I had paid for most of it. Her father raised a glass. To my daughter, the most brilliant woman I know, and to the kindest man she could have chosen. Applause erupted. I reached for the church program folded in my lap, the thick cream paper still smelling faintly of ink. I smoothed it open and scanned the text. Names, readings, order of procession. Her father walked her down the aisle. Her mother gave the first reading. Daniel's best man gave a toast. My name wasn't there. No mention of the mother who sewed his Halloween costumes, who saved up for a second-hand clarinet when he wanted to join band. The woman who worked Christmas Day 3 years in a row so he could have a decent winter coat. The woman who chose his college over her retirement. They hadn't forgotten. They'd chosen to exclude me. Weeks earlier, I had asked Emily gently, "Have you figured out where I'll be sitting at the reception?" She smiled, lips taut. "Don't worry, Margaret, we'll find somewhere tasteful for you." Tasteful. Like wallpaper. Like background noise. The memory made my jaw tighten. Back then, I had let the comment pass. Like so many before it, I wanted to be gracious. I told myself she was nervous, preoccupied, that weddings brought out the worst in people. But the pieces were falling into place now, each one sharper than the last. I remembered the spreadsheet I kept, months of invoices, vendor notes, updates, how I forwarded confirmations for the venue upgrade, the menu revisions, the dress fittings, how no one ever asked if I could afford it. They just assumed I would cover it. 2 days before the wedding, I'd seen it, by accident, on my niece's Venmo feed. His mom's covering everything. Might as well go big. Wedding vibes. Sent from Emily to one of her bridesmaids, tagged with champagne glasses and a wink face. I hadn't said a word. The chair beneath me creaked as I shifted. My ankles ached in heels I hadn't worn in years. My stomach churned, not from hunger, but from something deeper. Something like shame, but with anger wrapped around its edges. The kitchen clattered behind me. A tray of entrees hit the counter too hard. A voice barked about missing salad plates. The door to the reception swung open again, a waitress pushing through, laughter chasing her back into the heat and steam. Through the door's glass pane, I saw them. Daniel and Emily were posing now, standing beneath the neon sign, her head tipped back in a perfect angle of joy, his hand snug at her waist. Guests leaned in to capture the moment on their phones. And then, in the middle of that frozen image, Emily turned slightly. Our eyes met. It was only a second, less than that, but she saw me. She knew where I was, on a folding chair near the mop sink. She saw me and smiled, not sheepishly, not apologetically, calm, confident, like it had all gone according to plan, because it had. That smile wasn't ignorance, it was victory. She had won. She had claimed Daniel's full attention, his loyalty, his image, and she had made sure the person who came before her, the person who built him, was tucked away just far enough to not spoil the photos. I inhaled deeply through my nose. The kitchen air tasted like salt and resentment. I reached into my purse and pulled out a handkerchief, dabbing the corner of my mouth even though nothing was there. A habit, maybe. Or maybe just a small attempt to preserve some dignity, to give my hands something to do other than shake. My gaze drifted to a nearby tray of hors d'oeuvres, crab puffs, deviled eggs, stuffed mushrooms, all chosen from a tasting menu I attended alone because Emily said she was too busy and Daniel had a dentist appointment. I remembered every moment I said yes. Yes to the custom invites from Vermont. Yes to the 5-tier cake instead of 3. Yes to the upgraded chairs, so the photos would look elevated. Each yes chipped away a little more of me. I had told myself I was being helpful, supportive, that this was just what mothers did. But sitting there, the smell of fryer oil clinging to my dress, I realized it wasn't support. It was surrender. And for what? To be erased? A laugh rang out from the reception. Susan, I recognized the tone. Emily's mother was holding court at the head table, her pearls glinting under the string lights. I caught a fragment of her voice. Margaret. Oh, she's around here somewhere. Then more laughter, casual, effortless, like I was a misplaced coat. I looked over to the far side of the reception. My sister Carol and cousin Diane were seated near the exit. Neither of them turned my way. Not once. They were comfortable with the illusion, comfortable enough to sip wine and pass bread baskets and pretend like I wasn't just a few feet away, watching from the other side of the kitchen doors. I closed my eyes for a moment, and when I opened them, I didn't feel small. I felt sharp. This wasn't an oversight, it was choreography, and I was the cut scene. How many times had I said yes just to stay allowed in the room? While they danced beneath gold chandeliers and toasted with flutes of chilled Prosecco, I made 3 phone calls, each one short, director, final. The first was to the florist. Sunday delivery canceled. Payment withheld. No explanation offered, none requested. The second was to the band. The evening encore? Cut. They wouldn't be needed for brunch, nor for the cocktail hour they'd been promised. The deposit would remain untouched, but there'd be no second installment. The third call went to the bar service. I requested the cancellation of the extended open bar. Yes, I was aware that the bartenders had already been scheduled. No, I wouldn't be covering any additional fees. Just cancel it. When I hung up, my fingers didn't tremble. My pulse didn't spike. I set the phone down beside the bed in the hotel room I'd checked into alone, the soft hum of the mini fridge blending with the faint music that still seeped through the walls. It sounded like a distant party in another life. I didn't cry. I didn't even sit down. Instead, I walked over to the window, pulled aside the heavy curtains, and looked out at the parking lot glistening faintly under the overhead lights. Cars glowed like beetles in the night. The silence in the room wasn't heavy, it was clean, like newly swept floors, like the absence of something that never belonged. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my reflection in the dark glass. My makeup had faded, mascara smudged beneath both eyes. My lips were dry, the color mostly gone. Still, I looked more like myself than I had in years. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed 2:11 a.m. I lay back on the stiff comforter, still in my mauve chiffon dress, and closed my eyes, not to sleep. I wasn't tired, but to listen, to the pulse of silence, to my own breathing, to the faint echo of celebration one floor below that no longer involved me. By morning, the music had stopped. There were missed calls on my phone. Daniel, Emily, my niece, a few numbers I didn't recognize. Texts began flooding in sometime after dawn. "Where are you?" The florist never showed. "Why is the band gone?" "Is everything okay?" I didn't respond. Instead, I checked out of the hotel without a word, slid into the driver's seat of my car, and turned onto the long stretch of highway that would take me home. The sun rose in pieces, first orange, then gold, then washed out yellow. It felt like it belonged to me. The roads were mostly empty. I didn't play music, I didn't call anyone. I just drove. The house was quiet when I arrived. The roses I'd planted the summer before bloomed wildly by the front gate, as if they hadn't noticed anything had changed. Inside, I made a cup of coffee, black, no sugar, and carried it with me to the bedroom. I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser and pulled out the red folder. It had been there for years. Tucked beneath old insurance paperwork and outdated receipts, it had become invisible, like so many parts of my life that once felt urgent and had since faded into background noise. But now, it felt loud. It buzzed in my hand. I carried it to the kitchen table and sat down. The room was filled with pale morning light. Dust hung in the air, illuminated like gold threads. I peeled back the flap and took out the first letter. It was dated 7 years ago. The envelope was yellowed, the ink slightly faded. I recognized the slanted handwriting immediately. Michael's. I hesitated. My husband had died without ceremony. A quiet end to a messy life. We hadn't spoken in over a decade when the news came. I never opened this letter when it arrived. I couldn't. I was afraid of what it might say, of how it might unmake me. But now I unfolded the paper slowly. The words were deliberate. The opening line simple. "Margaret, I know you never wanted to hear from me again, but I need to tell you something." I read each sentence carefully, my eyes moving slowly over the page, though I already knew where it was going. I could feel it coming like a tremor before an earthquake. "Daniel isn't biologically yours." I blinked. Emily was pregnant when we got together. She was 18, terrified. She didn't want to keep him. I told her I'd handle it. I told you he was ours, that it was a mistake before we married. You believed me. And then you raised him. You loved him. You gave him a life. I sat very still. The letter trembled slightly in my hand, but my face didn't move. He wasn't mine, not by blood, not by accident, not even by betrayal of fidelity. He had been handed to me like a question, and I had answered it for more than 30 years without ever knowing I was being tested. I refolded the letter, pressed my palm flat against it. Then I opened the folder again. There was another sheet, thinner, folded twice. A second letter, dated 3 days before Michael died. I unfolded it with slower hands. "Margaret, if you're reading this, I guess the first letter reached you. But there's more. Daniel was never supposed to be yours. I told Emily I'd give him up for adoption, but when he arrived, I couldn't, and I couldn't tell you the truth. I watched you raise him with more love than I'd ever seen in anyone. You mothered a child who wasn't yours, who wasn't even meant to stay. But you stayed. I read that line twice. You stayed. And I had. Through fevers, broken bones, parent-teacher conferences, first loves, first heartbreaks, college applications, job interviews, birthday cakes, and silent dinners. I had stayed. I folded the second letter, slid it back into the folder, and placed it on the counter. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt peeled open, exposed in a way that was strange, but not unwelcome. The truth hadn't destroyed me. It had clarified something I hadn't been able to name. I stood up, poured the last of my coffee down the sink, and looked out the kitchen window. The garden needed weeding. The bird feeder was nearly empty. Life waited, not in revenge, not in regret, but in motion. He thinks I'm just hurt. He has no idea what I've remembered, and I couldn't help but wonder, what would he say if he knew he was never mine? But I stayed anyway. He knocked like someone who knew I was home but wasn't sure he should be there. I didn't rush to the door. I let the moment stretch, let him stand on the porch and feel the weight of silence. Through the frosted glass, I could see his shape. Tall, broad-shouldered, hands tucked into the pockets of his slacks, like a boy waiting outside the principal's office. When I opened the door, he looked up quickly. His face was tight, like he'd been rehearsing for hours and still didn't know his first line. "Hi, Mom." I didn't answer. I stepped aside. He hesitated before walking in, his eyes immediately scanning the room. Something about his posture shifted when he noticed what was missing. The framed photos that once lined the mantel, the snapshots of school plays, graduation, beach trips. Every trace of him had been taken down. The house felt bigger without them, cleaner. He moved to the center of the living room, then turned to face me. "I didn't come to fight." I nodded once and gestured toward the armchair. He sat. I didn't. On the coffee table between us sat a worn cardboard box. Its corners were soft from time, but the edges were neat. Inside, receipts, vendor contracts, final payments. Tucked beneath them, 2 folded letters in familiar handwriting. Daniel glanced at the box, but didn't reach for it. "I've been trying to understand," he said quietly. "Emily's upset. People are asking questions. You didn't answer any of my messages." "No," I said. The fridge in the kitchen hummed in the background. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, each second louder than it needed to be. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Was this about the seating?" I let the silence sit between us, heavy and full. I didn't think—" He started, but I cut in. "That's exactly the problem, Daniel. You didn't think." He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. "You didn't think when you let her seat me behind the kitchen doors. You didn't think when your voice rang out across that ballroom thanking every soul but the one who paid for the roof over your head that night. You didn't think when you said I was your whole world and then carved me out of it." His eyes dropped. "I didn't know it would hurt you like that." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I'm not angry because you're not my biological son," I said slowly. "I'm angry because I raised you. I stayed when no one else did. And when it mattered, you forgot I was ever there." He swallowed hard. Emily said she thought it would be cleaner, for the photos, more aesthetic, that having too many family voices might feel chaotic. I laughed, softly, bitterly. "Cleaner." He looked at the box then. "What is this?" "Open it." He hesitated, then lifted the lid. His hands hovered over the papers like they were hot to the touch. He pulled out a copy of the invoice from the venue, the florist's final statement, a printout of the bank transfer to the band, the check for the dress, the chairs, the upgraded cocktails. "Every dollar," I said. "Every decision, every favor I called in." He dug deeper and found the letters. When he saw the handwriting, something in his face changed. He knew. He read quickly at first, then slower. When he finished the second letter, he didn't look up right away. His jaw flexed. A muscle twitched at his temple. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Because it never mattered to me." I walked to the mantel, lifted an empty frame, and turned it face down. "I loved you like you were mine because In every way that counted, you were. He looked stunned. Then why now? I faced him fully. Because I spent 3 decades being your foundation, and last week you erased me with a seating chart. He ran a hand through his hair. I was overwhelmed. I wasn't thinking. I didn't. No, I cut in. You did think. You chose not to speak. You chose comfort. You chose her. He stood slowly. Is there a way back? I didn't answer. He looked at the box again, then picked it up, carefully, as if the contents might fall apart if shaken. I walked him to the door. As he stepped out, he paused at the threshold. The sunlight hit his face, and for a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who scraped his knees and cried when I pulled out splinters, the one who asked for chocolate chip pancakes on Sunday mornings and left notes under my pillow on Mother's Day. You always said I was your whole world, he said softly. I met his eyes. You were, I replied. And now, I'm finally mine. He didn't respond. I closed the door. The latch clicked into place with a satisfying finality. Through the window, I watched him walk to his car, the box tucked under his arm like something fragile or forgotten. He left with the box, and I closed the door behind both of them. Then I turned back toward the house I had built from scratch, furnished with love, held together with sleepless nights and unmatched devotion. And for the first time, it belonged only to me. The fridge kept humming. The clock kept ticking. And I asked myself quietly as I leaned against the door, how do you bury a child who's still breathing but no longer sees you? There were mismatched plates, string lights strung unevenly across the back porch, and people who didn't need me to disappear for them to shine. The scent of roasted garlic filled the kitchen, carried by a breeze that made the wind chimes outside sing a soft, wandering melody. I moved between the stove and the small oak table, barefoot, a dish towel slung over my shoulder, sleeves rolled up. The house felt warm in a way it hadn't in years. Not hot, not heavy, just full. The lemon butter sauce was bubbling, the tomatoes blistered in the oven until their skins cracked. I stirred slowly, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to stay in that moment, surrounded by scents and color and peace. Claire was the first to arrive. She knocked once, then let herself in, a bottle of wine tucked under her arm and her smile just slightly crooked, like always. "Smells like Italy in here," she said, kicking off her shoes. "And I mean the real kind, not the Olive Garden kind." I laughed, setting down the wooden spoon. "It's lemon, garlic, and whatever joy smells like." She tilted her head. "You look alive, Maggie." Alive. I didn't realize how much I'd been performing stillness. For years, my body had moved, cooked, cleaned, bought, arranged, but my heart had been frozen. Now it was thawing one garlic clove at a time. Within 15 minutes, the house filled with voices. Dina arrived with a warm baguette and a story about nearly rear-ending a city bus. Mr. Henderson, my next-door neighbor, brought a mismatched pair of wine glasses and a container of olives he swore were imported, but I knew he bought them from the corner store. Everyone settled in without fanfare. There was no formal toast, no assigned seating. The plates didn't match. The napkins were cloth, but old. The chairs creaked. No one noticed. We passed bowls, refilled glasses, told stories that didn't need polish. Dina confessed she'd once called in sick to work just to sit at a diner alone with a book. Mr. Henderson admitted he had a crush on the pharmacist, but had been too afraid to ask if she liked jazz. Claire leaned across the table to refill my glass. "This pasta," she said, "is better than anything I've paid for in a restaurant. You know that, right?" I shrugged, smiling. Not politely, but from somewhere deep. "This is the first time I've cooked just for me," I said. "Not for a son's birthday. Not to impress his fiancée. Not to prove I was worth a thank you, just because I wanted to eat something that tasted like effort." There was a quiet moment after that. Not awkward, just full. Then Claire stood, glass raised. "I think we should toast." The others murmured in agreement. She turned to me. To Margaret, she said, her voice even, her gaze steady. For remembering she doesn't need an invitation to take her seat at her own table. For choosing herself. Everyone clinked glasses. I did too. This table isn't fancy, I said, the words rising without rehearsal. But it's mine, and so is this moment. Outside, the string lights swayed gently in the wind. The moon peeked between clouds, casting silver lines on the lawn. Someone laughed, Mr. Henderson probably, at his own story, and Claire leaned into Dina's shoulder, giggling. I sat back in my chair, napkin draped across my lap, and looked around. No one was performing. No one was posing. No one here needed me to be small for them to feel big. There were no speeches thanking someone else for my labor, no photos taken with me cut out of the frame, no chairs placed behind kitchen doors, just people who knew how to make space and how to sit in it with grace. I didn't check my phone once. It lay face down in a drawer, untouched. The pasta was nearly gone. The bread basket sat empty but for a few crumbs. Someone opened a second bottle of wine, and Claire brought out a box of cookies she'd hidden in her purse, just in case. I took one, powdered sugar clinging to my fingertips. And somewhere in that laughter, gentle, imperfect, true, I stopped waiting for an apology that was never coming. The ache didn't vanish, but it softened. It folded into something bearable, something I could live with. And I asked myself, not bitterly, not mournfully, just curiously, what if family is just who makes room for you at their table? The roses bloomed the way I used to hope he would look at me, open, unapologetic, reaching for the light. I sat on the front porch with a mug of hot coffee between my hands. The air was soft with spring, the kind that brushed gently against your face and reminded you the world keeps moving, even when you're not looking. Wind stirred the chimes, scattering a lazy melody across the garden. Inside, the house was quiet. But it wasn't the brittle quiet of being ignored. It was the rich kind, the kind you earn. There were no messages on my phone that morning, no calls, no apologies. And for the first time, I didn't check, hoping to find one. I unlocked my phone anyway, opened the contacts, scrolled until I found his name. I didn't delete the number. I just deleted the label. Daniel Langley became a string of digits again, not because I was erasing him, but because I was letting him take his place in my life, not at the center, not defining me. Just a fact, like an address you used to live at, something that once fit but no longer does. I rose and stepped inside. The walls were bare where the frames had once hung. For a moment, I expected the old ache to twist again in my chest, but it didn't. I didn't flinch. I walked past each empty hook and felt nothing but calm. The kitchen table was clean, set for one. A small vase held 2 sunflowers, crooked, imperfect, bright. I pulled open the drawer near the fridge and took out a notepad, a fresh one, clean pages. A pen clicked in my hand. At the top, I wrote, "Dinner guests, next month." I wrote Claire first, then Dina, then Mr. Henderson, of course. I paused, then added someone new, the woman from the bookstore who always asked about my weekend. Her name was Annette, I thought. Or maybe Anita. I'd ask next Sunday. It didn't matter if we'd never shared a meal. She had smiled like I belonged. That was enough. I folded the list in half and set it beneath a candle on the counter. Not a memorial candle, not one lit for grief, just a simple white pillar. For no one. For myself. For now. I struck a match, lit it, and watched the flame catch and hold. No ritual, no prayer, just presence. Then I walked into the living room and sat down at the desk near the window. A breeze lifted the corner of a paper I hadn't touched in years. The light hit my skin in a way that reminded me of who I used to be before all the folding chairs and closed doors. I opened to the first page of the notepad and wrote 3 words. Begin again, Margaret. Not because I needed a reinvention, but because I had stepped out of the old roles, mother, provider, convenient silence, and into something fuller. I wasn't the mother they forgot. I was the woman they never bothered to know, and now I knew her. She liked lemon pasta and linen shirts that didn't cling. She lit candles for ambiance, not remembrance. She laughed at dumb jokes and played jazz while she washed dishes. She didn't wait for permission, or acknowledgement, or a seat at someone else's table. She had her own. I stood and opened the front door. The sunlight poured in, brushing my shoulders like a shawl. I stepped onto the porch again, took a sip of coffee, and listened. Not for footsteps, not for ringing phones, but for birdsong, breeze, the gentle tick of a life reclaimed. And I thought, what if peace isn't the silence they give you, but the one you finally claim? The story didn't end. I just stopped letting others write it. As sunlight warmed my porch and laughter echoed from my own table, I finally felt like I belonged to myself. After years of being quiet, I realized something simple and life-changing. No one has the right to make you invisible. You don't need to earn your place in the family you built. If you've ever felt overlooked, spoken over, or quietly pushed aside, tell your story. You matter, and your voice deserves to be heard.